Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. This is an important video, and I want to explain some things about what's going on with Haarp, cruise ships, and of course the connection to Bill Gates. Now, Bill Gates, if you haven't heard, they just announced that they're finally running their hydrogen fuel cell mega yachts that Bill Gates, of course, funded, which cost very close to $1 billion to make. And Bill Gates is not making these things because Bill Gates cares about the environment so much that he would make a $1 billion yacht. Really, he's making these for multiple reasons. And these are different ways that they are heating up the sky and using energy that they're generating and harvesting and antennas to manipulate the weather, because that's how this works. And I'll explain it to you in the video, which I've done many times over the years. But I want to start by pointing out Bill Gates, and the impression of Bill Gates seems to be an important narrative that's out there, which is why Bill Gates is releasing propaganda about himself to try and protect himself from unruly civilians who realize that Bill Gates has his hand in many of the pots that all seem to steer towards the New World Order and global enslavement. Bill Gates, of course, pretends to be a philanthropist. He pretends to care about the environment. He seems to care about getting a certain something inside of everybody's bodies because he was at the forefront of that. And of course, he wants to suck the carbon out of the air as well and suffocate humanity. So there seems to be a lot going on with getting Bill Gates out there in the open to protect him, in a sense, by putting him on TV and putting on the laugh box and having him show his family and some of the stuff that he did in his docu-series on Netflix, which I exposed. It tries to humanize. They're trying to humanize him because he's clearly afraid that people are figuring out what he's involved in. So I want to talk about this new hydrogen-powered super yacht that Bill Gates has. And you know what? You might as well put one of those Apple tags or those tracking tags on Bill's yachts so that we can watch where his yachts go. And then maybe coincidentally, we'll start seeing hurricanes appear at sea right around the areas that Bill Gates and his yachts end up going, because I'm sure they're going to be correlated. Now, if you don't understand what that means, I'll get into that in a second. But don't forget, in this article, they talk about how they're running on green hydrogen and they're storing it at negative 423.4 degrees Fahrenheit. These are all things they don't expect the common person to understand. But I thought it was pretty funny at them putting the actual temperature out there of how cold they have to run these ships at. Because it reminds me a lot of that stuff with quantum systems and quantum computing, and how Gordy Rose came out and told us how these quantum systems, and we know these quantum computers need to be very, very cold. They need to be stored at very, very cold temperatures, okay? Gordy Rose is the guy who came out and talked about how quantum computing is literally summoning demonic entities, little old people, little old deities / demons that can only be summoned if the temperatures are in the 400 degree plus freezing level. And it's also very interesting that a lot of movies that when demonic entities are present, like in the Upside Down and Stranger Things, right? It's snowing and it's cold. Poltergeist, it's cold, right? On the other side, The Sixth Sense, he's so cold, right? Very interesting that there's always something about a coldness in the atmosphere when these demonic entities / ghosts are actually present. And one of the themes of the climate initiative is about what? Cooling the earth. That's something I've talked about many times. So keep that in mind with just how cold it is on Bill Gates' ship and what kind of demonic entities he's likely summoning while out to sea. So Bill Gates' ship is nothing more than a gigantic energy harvesting machine, because that's really what yachts and cruise ships are. If you've never noticed before, most times that there's massive hurricanes, the ships still go out to sea. If you didn't see the viral video that showed the cruise ship that was battling Hurricane Milton's 20-foot waves and how passengers were frightened to death. Now, if you do a basic Google search, of course, this is where people get their actual information from without researching. And of course, if you do that, Google will tell you that cruise ships can go out during hurricanes because They are designed to handle the rough seas, and they could be redirected and rerouted to avoid danger, right? Because that makes no sense whatsoever. If you heard that there was a tornado in the sky and a hurricane in the sky, would you get on an airplane? You'd probably say no, and that's why most of the time airplanes are grounded. But cruise ships are always out to sea during hurricanes. And you would think that the majority of passengers would say, I'll never get on a ship if there's a hurricane, but they make people feel like, hey, you're going to be safe. Don't ruin your plans. Don't cancel your trip. We're sending the ship out anyway, regardless of whether you get on or not, because that's what happens with cruise ships. They end up sending them out anyway. Do you ever hear about these destination to nowhere cruises that go out? They literally have to run the cruise ships, whether people are on them or not. And that's because the cruise ships are used as a weather modification device. Cruise ships have generators on there that can generate mass amounts of energy, and that is needed, right? So let's think in terms of Haarp. When we hear about weaponized weather and we hear about this stuff, everybody's head and mind goes to Haarp, which it should. You see an antenna field at Haarp, right? And everybody's seen all the clips of Haarp showing beams coming out of the antennas and going into the sky, and them telling you, well, we're just sending all these beams into the sky because we want to see what ends up happening. Now, everybody's on to Haarp, but what they're not onto is that antennas are all around us, right? What do you see when you see Haarp? You see a field of antennas. And all that really differentiates Haarp's magnetic field of satellites versus any other antenna out there is the wattage that these things run at. Now, they claim that Haarp runs at, I think it's 1 billion watts of energy that's used at Haarp that they generate and then fly into the sky, which creates the artificial auroras, which I've covered many times, that people think are actually naturally occurring because they put Bill Nye on the news or all these fake doctors and scientists to tell them as to why they're seeing all these bizarre things in the sky, because they don't want the civilians to realize that wicked people who are in power have wicked demonic technology where they're doing these things in the sky because there's something bigger that's coming. So they tell you that they have 1 billion watts there. Now, cruise ships have millions of wattage of energy that they can generate, and the generators on those ships do that. Now, if you haven't noticed, cruise ships have massive antennas all over them. They are, in fact, filled with antennas. Just people don't notice it because they disguise it, just like people don't notice those towers around us, right? They don't look like the field that we see from the photos of Haarp, so people don't think anything of it. Oh, it's a gigantic circle, right? Or it's a 5G tower. That doesn't look like the towers up at Haarp, so they can't be the same thing. Well, why would they use or need to use the same exact antenna everywhere? There's antennas all around us. And the world's largest generators are used in power plants, and cruise ships are no different than power plants at sea, power stations, right? Running out to sea. So they use their antennas and they shoot frequency waves into the sky. So at this point, if you're trying to understand and think to yourself, well, wait a minute. So the frequency waves go into the sky, so they must just disperse into space and go out into nowhere. But that's obviously not true. For anyone out there that actually thinks space is real and that we've gone to the moon, it's time to wake up. Now, Bible believers always seem to pass over Genesis chapter 1, verse 6, 7, and 8. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, the heavens above, which are divided by the firmament. Even mentioned in Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. So what they're doing is they're sending all of this electricity up into the sky, and they're creating this massive energy source in the sky, and they can manipulate and use that to do all sorts of things in the atmosphere. And that's why cruise ships run during hurricanes. That's why you see those antennas that I've shown you before off the coast of Florida that are underground that they tell you are there for some type of coral excavate. It's there to help out future coral reefs and to do research on coral reefs. That's why those wind turbines are out to sea. They're massive, massive generators of energy, and they're used against us. So that's part of the reason that they don't ever want you to believe about a firmament above, and they want you to believe that things just fly out into space because they use the sky above us as a weapon against us, and frequencies are used against us all the time. They're used more than for just manipulating the weather. We know that they use frequency warfare against us and microwave us on a day in, day out basis, which is why people feel all these illnesses that they've never felt before, from depression to anxiety to getting diseases at rapid rates, right? We're supposed to be advanced in modern science, yet people get sicker than they've ever gotten before, even with all the modern medicine that we have, right? They want you to believe about people getting the chicken pox 100 years ago and how they needed to get a magic potion in them so that they could live longer. Yet in today's world, all they're trying to do is stick stuff inside of you while people continually are dying at a faster rate than ever before because of diseases that they just conveniently cannot cure, yet none of these billionaires ever seem to die from it, right? All these people never get cancer. They live to be 100. Jimmy Carter, we were told, had irreversible brain tumor many years ago. And then conveniently, right after we were told that, his grandson died, and here he is kicking 100. Now, he doesn't look like he's alive. He looks like the grandfather from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but nonetheless is still here, right? Or George Bush Sr., how long he lived, or Rockefeller, or Rothschild, who just supposedly recently passed. And most of these people don't actually pass. They transfer vessels. So back to Bill Gates and his yacht, right? I'm bringing attention to this because Bill Gates being out to sea is something we should always pay attention to, right? Now, I want to point at this Bloomberg video that I've shown recently in a couple video clips, right? Where they talk about how the billionaire is going to be known as the Hurricane Tamer. So I want people to have the mindset of, well, they were talking about decades ago, Bill Gates being able to tame hurricanes, right? Because this is what they used to tell us about the weather modification that they were creating. They used to tell us that they were creating these things to steer hurricanes away. Then they stopped telling us about it as time went by, from Operation Popeye pretty much to now. Now, of course, they've trained people to think that weather modification isn't real, that you can't control Mother Nature. Anybody who says that stuff is a conspiracy theorist, right? But they were even out in the open talking about Bill Gates being known as someone who was going to tame hurricanes. In fact, Bill hired a fleet of ships to cool the ocean. He sent a fleet of ships out to cool the ocean to steer hurricanes away. But why all of a sudden do we not hear about that type of technology, Bill? This is the clip that aired on Bloomberg.
When you hear the name Bill Gates, you probably think Microsoft founder, but now the billionaire may be known as the Hurricane Tamer. Gates is listed as one of 13 inventors on a patent filed for hurricane prevention methods. Hurricanes gain strength from condensation driven by warm surface water, which leads to greater wind speeds. Gates and his team plan to use a fleet of ships to cool warm surface water by mixing it with colder water from greater depths. They hope this will sap energy from growing storms, leading to weaker, less devastating hurricanes. The patent, which isn't expected to be approved for another 18 months, was submitted by Seareed LLC, a sub-entity of an Intellectual Ventures and an invention acquisition and development firm.
So they tell us that hurricanes gain strength from condensation, which is driven by warm surface water, which leads to greater wind, which is also interesting. If you see a lot of the, a lot of the stuff that's coming out, that NASA's pumping out over there as well, which can also manipulate the skies, which is what NASA's also involved in addition to many other things, including laundering money for trafficking. But we won't get into that because we don't want to get the channel taken down today. But the reason I show you that clip is because that's Bloomberg. That's national news, okay? Where they're talking about Bill Gates taming hurricanes. Now, how come that's not a topic anymore about taming hurricanes? How come Bill doesn't go out there and say, well, I have this stuff I'm trying to tame hurricanes with? How come all they talk about is sucking the carbon out of the air and how we all need to stop eating meat and we need to live a certain way? Well, because Bill was never going to actually tame the hurricanes. That's because Bill was out to sea with a fleet of ships manipulating the weather. And they wanted people out there to think that Bill was out there trying to help. Now, the only person Bill's trying to help is himself and Beelzebub and whatever other demons he's summoning and having dinner with every night. But Bill Gates, in addition to artificial intelligence, right? Think about the things that Bill's got his face in right now. In addition to releasing this mega yacht that can generate so much insane amount of electricity out at sea. He's got his hand in what? AI. He's getting rolled out, convincing people that we need AI. He was just rolled out for what? Talking about how we need to get potions inside of our body. What's the other thing Bill's rolled out talking about? The climate and the climate disaster. His book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, which we see the mainstream media continue to shove down our throats, and celebrities as well, quietly, casually always try to push it onto people like Hugh Jackman, and all these celebrities are always tweeting out or putting Instagram posts of them reading it, trying to convince their audience that climate change is real. Because again, they won't want you to think that they have the ability to manipulate the weather, because then their game is over. Then they could stop destroying and ruining people's lives. In fact, their lives would be destroyed and ruined because they probably wouldn't live to see tomorrow. So Bill has his hand in all of these things, right? All of these things. He has books about the climate. He has books about magic potions. He has books about artificial intelligence and nanotechnology. Bill even out there openly talking about how we need to remove carbon from the air, even though human beings need carbon to live, which is the funniest thing about all of this psyop that's going on right now, is that people are agreeing with one another that we need to remove carbon from the air, but they don't even know that we need carbon to live. It's a fundamental building block of life. Humans need carbon. Plants need carbon. We all need carbon, which thus means we can't survive without carbon. And these people are openly telling you that they want to remove it. Now, I mentioned this again about Bill and why Bill clearly has to be pushed out there and made to seem like this philanthropist. And I'm starting to think more and more it's because if people actually turn on the light bulb in their head and they start connecting the dots with how this guy who started Microsoft, whose father was on the board of Planned Parenthood, how is this guy involved in all of these things, just happen to be at the forefront of ruining and destroying all of our lives, right? So Bill comes out with a documentary. Of course, what's the main thing that Bill cares about? Well, it's the same thing that the government seems to care about in regards to the hurricanes that just hit. Telling you about misinformation and disinformation, right? Telling you the benefits of all the things that Bill's involved in, and then putting out stuff like this, which tells you that Bill is so scared that people are going to figure out what he's actually doing, that he has his own misinformation team and algorithms that are studying our behavior and monitoring us. And that's because Bill cares about his image, right? It's not because of anything else.
Yeah, the pandemic was definitely social media at its worst. And what if we have a pandemic that's 10 times worse and extreme measures
Don't say that. They're going to think you're going to cause it then.
That's right. I'm working on it.
Don't you say that. Cut that. Tell people something's going to happen. And then when it happens, they're like, oh.
This is not funny?
Content that will go everywhere. Millions of views if you say it.
And what if we have a pandemic that's 10 times worse? That's right. I'm working on it.
Don't you say that. Cut that.
I think Bill's biggest concern is misinformation about the topics and the issues he works on. We are going to show you some of the things that are hot right now, inflating things into these massive conspiracy theories that include microchips, farmland, vaccine technology, about puppeteering world affairs. This is a real-time dashboard of all the misinformation about you. These are all the posts and issues.
I wonder if some things like the microchipping thing, is that dropped to zero? Or is
That's like core to so many of those sections.
This blue line is really just about climate. A lot of this is about puppeteering the food supply. One of the emerging rumors and conspiracy theories is you have engineered ticks, and they bite people. They make people allergic to traditional meat in order to drive demand for synthetic meats. Glad you're laughing. I found this to be particularly depressing.
It's interesting to know how to fight back, though. You know, there's a lot of ways to fight back, could even make it worse.
Right. We noticed that, like, if you do fact checking, often that's actually just highlighting the story to more people.
Right, that clip was from Bill's docu-series. Okay, he's showing you data and keywords and what Bill's name is getting thrown around with and here and there. And you would think that Bill would just be hiding underground 24/7. Now, he is underground the majority of times. It's very rare that he's actually popping up to go on any of these shows. A lot of times when he's doing these interviews, he's getting green screen from underground. He's not really showing up in any studios because Bill really is at the forefront of everything that's going on. His hand's involved in everything. And that's a very easy way to wake people up. Is to say, well, why is he in this, and this? It's not even just one thing, right? Now, the AI thing you could look at and people will go, well, he's involved in computers. Oh, okay. Right. Okay. So he started Microsoft. Okay. Right. And we can get into stuff with quantum computing and demonic entities. We won't even go there. We would just say, fine, let Bill talk about AI. Bill's talking about nanotech under the skin. He's obsessed with it. He keeps talking about it, right? Talking about, what was some of the other stuff in there? Genetically engineered cattle ticks, right? The mosquitoes that he was harvesting out in Florida and Texas, unleashing GMO mosquitoes, right? Why? Because they serve as what? They serve as flying syringes. So how convenient, right? That Bill had his hand in that. And Bill wants to tell you that we got to have carbon sucked out of the air, right? But Bill is now working on a fleet of new ships, right? Hydrogen super yachts that, of course, Bill will use to tell people that what he calls Project 821, by the way. That's what this is called if you want to look into deeper detail about the actual ship. And all they really tell you is about, they don't give you real data. They'll tell you how much how much the generators, how much power they could generate. But that's not true. We can't take them at their word for anything. They say we live in a world filled with lies, and any information that comes out from them is nothing more than bullcrap. But what they do tell us, conveniently, is how cold the ship has to be. And they tell us about Project 821, because one of the things that people constantly get on Bill Gates about, which makes him lose credibility, is telling people about carbon emissions, right? And he's out on yachts, he's out on private jets, and they want you to start thinking, well, he's not a hypocrite. He does care, because they need you to believe in everything that they're spewing out of their mouths, the lies of the devil. And that's all that they are, lies of the devil. So I wonder if we actually tag Bill's fleet of ships that he runs out now, his new hydrogen super yachts. Now, I doubt that they have the amount of, the generators on there. I'm sure they could generate a lot of electricity, and they're going to be loaded with, the whole thing is a giant antenna out to sea. But I'm sure with the fact that they have these cooling devices on there, I'm sure they're actually just going to use these things to probably, in addition to summon demonic entities, use these ships again to generate electricity. I wouldn't be surprised if you tag the ship, like I said earlier, that you find these ships out to sea, and then a day later a hurricane pops up. Maybe some of the channels that track the storms can get in some type of correlation with the people that track airplanes and ships that are out to sea, and they can figure out what vessels are circulating around the time that these storms are beginning to manifest. Because then maybe we can start connecting dots. Now, normally you'll probably just find that they're military ships as well as cruise ships that are out there. But you'll probably also find Bill Gates' super yachts out there as well. So Bill Gates, the Hurricane Tamer, already had his own fleet of ships that he sent out to try to steer hurricanes away. He's no longer doing that. He's no longer talking about that because he doesn't want you to realize that they have the ability and have had the ability to steer storms away. Because then you would say, well, why don't they do that? Why do we even have hurricanes? Because then you wouldn't abide by the carbon footprint that's coming and the carbon laws and climate laws that are coming. And then you can't be a slave for them. Then you would actually wake up if you actually were thinking like that. But unfortunately, most people aren't. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless all of you as always and your families.